Welcome, listener, in the shadows. We bring stories into the light. Join me as we explore the encounters no one speaks of and the things that watch from the dark. You were never supposed to see this, but since you have, you might as well wear it. From the vaults of the shadows, a new collection of unsettling apparel and artifacts pulled straight from the stories that were never meant to surface. Soft, worn-in shirts and hoodies that feel like something you dug out of a locked trunk in an abandoned ranger station. This isn't just merch, it's evidence. The Forgotten Experiment, Day 1. Arrival at Black Hollow. Dr. Alan Grave had never been one to believe in ghost stories or urban legends. He was a scientist, a man of facts and logic, grounded in the pursuit of knowledge. But there was something about the rumors of Black Hollow that gnawed at his curiosity. It had been a forgotten place, a town erased from records, its existence buried under a veil of strange silence. To Alan, this was the ultimate puzzle. The town had vanished from the maps without a trace, an entire community gone, like a missing chapter in a history book. Theories had circulated for decades. Some said it was a natural disaster. Others whispered about a government experiment gone horribly wrong. Some even claimed that Black Hollow had been swallowed by the earth itself, its fate sealed by a curse or an ancient evil. For Alan, it didn't matter. He wasn't here to chase legends. He was here to uncover the truth, no matter how dark it might be. The van bumped over the desolate country road as they made their way deeper into the forgotten woods. The landscape around them was wild and untamed, with twisted trees reaching up like skeletal arms, their gnarled roots digging into the earth like they were desperately trying to hold on. The ground was soft with decay, the air thick with the scent of rotting leaves and damp soil. Alan looked back at his team. Marcus, the cameraman, had been quiet since they crossed the old bridge, the one that supposedly marked the last point of civilization before entering the unknown. He was always the first to crack a joke or comment on something, but now his usually boisterous energy had been replaced with a nervous tension. His camera dangled loosely at his side, forgotten for once. Beside him was Sarah, the historian, and Liam, a young intern fresh out of university. The three of them had been traveling together for months, researching forgotten towns, cryptids, and strange occurrences that had yet to be explained. But nothing had prepared them for the dark mystery of Black Hollow. The road stretched on, increasingly overgrown, with branches scratching at the sides of the van like fingers trying to pull them into the woods. Sarah leaned forward, her voice barely a whisper. "This place feels wrong." Her tone was flat, and the words hung heavy in the air. Alan tried to push the thought from his mind. He'd heard the same thing from people who'd ventured too close to the town. Stories about an unnerving silence, the feeling of being watched by invisible eyes, and the constant, oppressive weight of something lurking just beyond the edge of their vision. But it was just that, stories. "It's just isolation," Alan said, his voice firm. "After all, there are dozens of towns like this, places forgotten by time. We're here to document it, not to fall into superstition." But even as he said it, he felt the weight of Sarah's words settle deep in his chest. Something felt off. He couldn't put a finger on it, but it was as though the entire landscape was holding its breath, waiting. The van jolted to a stop, pulling Alan from his thoughts. They had reached the edge of the town. The faded welcome sign loomed in front of them, its letters half faded, covered in layers of dirt and rust. It read, "Welcome to Black Hollow." There was no date, no indication of how long the town had been forgotten. Alan climbed out first, followed by the others. The air was damp, the cold biting at their skin as they stepped onto the ground. The silence was deafening, no birds chirping, no rustling leaves in the wind, not even the hum of distant traffic or the buzzing of insects. The world outside seemed to have stopped moving altogether. "What now?" Marcus asked, his voice quieter than usual. Alan hesitated. "We explore. We need to document the town, take photographs, and gather any evidence we can find." He checked his old, weathered map. Black Hollow wasn't marked on any modern maps, but Alan had discovered an ancient government map from the early 1900s that had shown the town's exact location. As they walked through the deserted streets, the buildings around them seemed strangely untouched. The houses were perfectly intact, their windows dark and empty. But there was something unsettling about them. No signs of life, no movement, no sounds. Liam reached for his camera, the shutter clicking softly as he took a few wide shots of the streets. "This is eerie," he said, his voice trailing off. Alan didn't answer. He couldn't stop staring at the houses. The perfect stillness of it all gnawed at him, but he refused to let it show. The truth was, part of him was excited. This was what he had come for, the opportunity to uncover something new, something hidden in the folds of time. They ventured deeper into the town, and Alan noticed that the streets weren't paved in the way he had expected. Cracked cobblestone stretched out before them, uneven and broken. It wasn't a newer town, like the maps had suggested. It was an old one, as if the world had changed around it, but Black Hollow had remained frozen. Then they came upon the first sign of something wrong. At the center of the town stood an old clock tower, its hands stopped at 3:14. The bell that should have been at the top of the tower was missing, leaving only a hollow frame in its place. The structure was solid, but the air around it felt charged, as though the building itself was holding its breath. Sarah stepped forward, her fingers brushing against the rough surface of the stone. "This place doesn't make sense," she murmured. "It's like time stopped here." Liam glanced around, unease creeping across his face. "You don't think it's some kind of trap?" Alan turned to them, forcing a smile, though his stomach twisted in a way he couldn't explain. "No, no traps. We're just in an old town." The isolation made it hard to keep up with modern times. But even as he spoke, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that the town wasn't just forgotten. It had been deliberately erased, as if someone had tried to remove all traces of it from the world. They continued their exploration. As they moved deeper into the heart of Black Hollow, the shadows seemed to grow longer and the temperature dropped. Alan pulled his jacket tighter around himself, his breath visible in the crisp air. The silence was unbearable now, and the sound of their footsteps felt too loud, too intrusive. Then, as they turned a corner, they saw it. The town hall, large, imposing, and strangely intact. Its windows were covered in thick layers of grime, but the double doors stood open. Something inside called to them, something unspoken, beckoning them closer. Alan didn't hesitate. He stepped inside. The doors creaked on their hinges, the sound loud in the oppressive silence. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust, and the faint smell of mildew. But it wasn't the scent that caught Alan's attention. It was the heavy stillness, the oppressive weight of it all. The town hall was like a mausoleum, a forgotten space where time itself had stopped. And as Alan walked forward, he couldn't help but feel that something was waiting for them, something inside the walls. Day 2, unearthing the truth. The morning light filtered through the grime-covered windows of the town hall, casting a dim glow over the scattered papers on the desk. Alan woke with a heavy head, his mind still reeling from the strange feeling that had settled over him since they first arrived. His hands felt clammy, his nerves frayed by the unnerving silence that had followed them into the building. The town, the air, the feeling of being watched, it was all too much. But they had come this far, and there was no turning back. Marcus was already awake, camera in hand, focused on the desk in front of him. He was always the one to jump into action, his unease pushed aside by the drive to document. But this morning, even he seemed subdued, his usual energy lacking. "This place doesn't feel real," Marcus muttered as Alan approached. "I've been all over the world for shoots, but this is different. Like this place shouldn't exist." Alan nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. The night had been too strange, too filled with the soft rustle of movement beyond the walls, a presence that had lingered just out of reach. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was out there, watching, waiting. But it wasn't the eerie silence that caught his attention this morning. It was the pile of old documents on the desk, half buried under layers of dust and dirt. The handwriting on them was neatly scrawled, methodical in a way that seemed out of place for a town that had long been abandoned. Alan sat down, rifling through the papers. They were mostly reports, government documents detailing the experiments that had been carried out in Black Hollow in the years before its disappearance. The town had once been a test site for something called Project Stasis. The project, as Alan pieced together from the fragmented notes, had been focused on mind manipulation and behavioral conditioning. But the further he read, the more it became clear. The project had gone terribly wrong. One entry stood out, written in hasty, frantic script. "They are no longer human. We have made a terrible mistake. The subjects are changing, and we are losing control. Leave. Leave now before it is too late." Alan's heart thudded in his chest. What had these people done to the town's inhabitants? What had they unleashed? Sarah approached, peering over his shoulder. "What is it?" she asked, her voice cautious. Alan hesitated, then showed her the page. Project Stasis. The government experimented on the people of this town, changing them in ways we can't even begin to understand. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Whatever they became, it's still here." Sarah's face went pale as she read the entry. But how did it all go wrong? What happened to the people? Alan shook his head. "We need to keep looking. There has to be more. We need to find out exactly what happened here before we make any decisions." The team spent the rest of the day scouring the town hall, looking for any remaining clues about the experiments. As they dug through the documents, Alan felt an increasing sense of unease. There was something missing, a gap in the records, a place where the truth was hidden. It was like the town was trying to keep its secrets, but Alan was determined to uncover them. Hours passed. They found more documents, but they were fragmented, incomplete, and contradictory. A few pages referenced the people who had volunteered for the program, calling them subjects and listing them by number, not name. But as the sun began to set, one document caught Alan's eye. It was a letter from the project leader, addressed to a colleague, and it was unlike the others. "We've lost control. The people we've been testing are no longer under our control. They're changing. The experiments have backfired, and the town has become a breeding ground for something other. I'm locking myself in the lab. If anyone finds this, don't come here. It's too late. The subjects have evolved, and they're no longer the humans we knew. They've become something other, something worse." Alan's hand trembled as he finished reading. It was clear now. Whatever had happened here, whatever had changed the town's people, it had corrupted them, twisted them into something unnatural. The experiment had gone horribly wrong, and now the very town itself seemed to be haunted by the results. Day 3. The disturbance. The morning of Day 3 arrived with an unsettling calm. Alan, Marcus, Sarah, and Liam sat around the table in the town hall, trying to piece together what they had learned. The cold had crept into their bones, and the silence of Black Hollow seemed to press down on them like a weight. There were no birds, no rustling leaves, just the unnatural stillness that had hung over the town since their arrival. "I don't like this," Marcus said, his voice low. "It's like the town's alive, watching us." Sarah gave him a worried glance. "We've been here for too long. We need to get out of here before it's too late." Alan shook his head. "No, we need to find out more. We can't leave without understanding what happened." But just as he finished speaking, a loud bang echoed through the building, shaking the walls. The sound was followed by an eerie creaking from the ceiling above. Alan froze. Something was moving above them, slowly, purposefully. "What the hell was that?" Liam whispered. Alan's heart raced. "Stay calm. We don't know what it is." Another bang, louder this time, followed by a scraping noise, like something heavy dragging across the floor above. Suddenly, the door to the town hall slammed shut with a deafening crack. The sound seemed to reverberate through the entire building. "What the hell?" Marcus shouted, backing toward the window. "We're trapped." Alan's mind raced. "We need to get out. Now." But before they could make a move, the floor under their feet shuddered. A loud snarl echoed from the ceiling, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Heavy, uneven, something was coming. They ran for the door, but it wouldn't open. Outside, the town was still, silent, but they could hear something else. A low, growling sound, like the sound of a predator closing in. The town had woken up. Day 4, the search. After a sleepless night, the group decided to leave the town hall and explore deeper into Black Hollow. The tension in the air was palpable, thick with the heavy presence of something watching them. They had to know more about the town's history. What had truly happened here? What had they missed? The fear that had taken root in their hearts was now joined by a burning desire to find out the truth. The team moved carefully through the town, avoiding the streets that felt too open, instead choosing the back alleys and smaller, more isolated paths. They were on edge, every rustle of leaves or distant footstep making their hearts race. Alan led the way to the old research center, a building that stood at the edge of town. It was a crumbling structure, its windows boarded up and its door hanging loosely from its hinges. Inside, the smell of mold and decay hit them instantly. The walls were lined with old research papers, some written in neat handwriting, others in wild, scrawled notes. As they sifted through the papers, the story became clearer. The experiments, no, the treatment, had been aimed at creating a perfect society, a place where minds could be controlled, shaped into obedience. But the results were far from perfect. The people had evolved in a way that the scientists hadn't anticipated. They had mutated into something monstrous. The most chilling part was the last report, hidden deep within a drawer. It read, "They're no longer human, they're something else. We've created monsters. They're still here, waiting for the rest of us. The town is theirs now." Alan's heart sank. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an accident. They had been chosen, drawn here by something more ancient, more powerful than anything they could comprehend. The creatures were still here, and they were hungry. Day 5. The descent. The wind had picked up overnight, howling through the ruins of Black Hollow like a warning. The once familiar town now felt more like a hunting ground, the oppressive atmosphere pressing against the group as they ventured deeper into the dark heart of the place. Alan's heart was pounding in his chest as he led the group towards the center of town, where the research center's ominous warnings had all but confirmed their worst fears. The people of Black Hollow were still here, and they had changed. The road ahead was lined with overgrown foliage, the weeds tangling around abandoned vehicles, their rusted bodies half buried in the earth. Old wooden buildings leaned at odd angles, windows shattered or covered with dirt and grime. The smell of decay seemed to linger, seeping into every crack and crevice, mixing with the cold, damp air. It was a smell that clung to their clothes, to their skin. "I can't stand this," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper as they walked past a row of decaying homes. "It feels wrong. Every step we take, it feels like something's watching us." Alan nodded, his throat dry. Something was watching them, and he wasn't sure how much longer they could stay in this town before they, too, would become a part of it. Another piece of whatever nightmare had claimed Black Hollow. As they rounded a corner, the outline of the abandoned church came into view. It was a hollow structure, its towering steeple looming over the landscape like the hand of some ancient god reaching toward the sky. The doors were cracked open, and the air around it felt charged, heavy with something they couldn't quite identify. "We need to check inside," Alan said, his voice low but steady. The others exchanged wary glances, but no one objected. They all knew they needed to uncover whatever secrets lay hidden within the walls of the old church. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the once white walls now stained with mildew. The wooden pews were warped and covered in a blanket of moss, giving the place an almost otherworldly feel. The only sound was their footsteps, echoing off the stone floor. The air itself felt stale, like it hadn't been disturbed in decades. Alan stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room. A sense of dread washed over him, but he pushed it aside. He had come this far, they all had. There was no turning back now. Near the altar, a single book lay open on the stone. Its pages were old, yellowed, but the text was still legible. Alan moved toward it, feeling a sudden cold chill as he reached for the book. The moment his fingers brushed the cover, a violent shiver ran down his spine. The book felt unnaturally heavy, as if it carried the weight of something ancient, something dark. Liam, the last to enter the church, suddenly froze, his eyes widening in alarm. "Alan," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Look!" Alan turned, his blood running cold. In the far corner of the church, half hidden by shadows, a figure stood motionless. It was tall, its form cloaked in darkness, the features barely discernible. Its shape seemed to flicker, shifting in and out of focus, like something that didn't entirely belong in the world. "Is that?" Marcus began, but he couldn't finish his sentence. The words seemed to lodge in his throat. Before anyone could move, the figure stirred. its eyes gleaming a sickly yellow in the dim light, locking onto them. It opened its mouth, a sound that was neither human nor animal, but something primal, guttural, a sound of pure rage. And then it moved. A deep, bone-shaking growl echoed from its throat as it lunged toward them, its limbs unnaturally long, its body twisting in ways that should have been impossible. Alan barely had time to react as the figure surged forward, a blur of movement and rage. They scattered. In the chaos, Alan's heart was pounding in his chest. They were trapped. There was no way out. The figure, if it could even be called that, was too fast, too powerful. The town was alive with it, with the malice that poured from the earth itself. Sarah screamed as she collided with one of the old pews, but the sound was drowned by another growl that seemed to shake the very air. Alan's mind raced, his instincts screaming at him to run, but there was nowhere to go. Suddenly, the creature paused. It stopped just short of Alan, its yellow eyes narrowed, its lips pulling back into a sickening grin. It was examining them, studying them, as if it knew exactly who they were, as if it had been waiting for them. The floor beneath Alan's feet creaked, and in the instant that the creature hesitated, Alan grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her away. "Move," he shouted. They darted toward the door, with the figure following them at a pace that made the hair on the back of Alan's neck stand up. The creature was so fast, its movements were unpredictable, like it had no regard for the physical laws of the world. As they reached the church's entrance, Liam slammed the door shut behind them, blocking the creature's pursuit, for now. But Alan could hear it still, its snarls and scratching coming from the other side of the door, a reminder of the danger that lurked just beyond. For a moment, the team stood in stunned silence, their breaths heavy in the cool air, their bodies trembling. "It's hunting us," Marcus said, his voice hoarse. It's not just random anymore." Alan clenched his fists. "No, it's not. This thing was created." They had no idea what they had walked into. The town, the people, the experiments, they were all connected. And now, the creatures were no longer just subjects of the experiment. They had evolved, mutated into something far more dangerous, far more savage. They had awoken, and now there was no going back. Day 6. The reckoning. The group knew their time was running out. The creature that had stalked them in the church wasn't just a figment of their imagination, it was real, and it was just one of many. The rest were still out there, and they were growing stronger. They needed answers. But the more they uncovered, the less they wanted to know. The truth was out there, but it came with a cost, the cost of survival. Alan and his team were no longer just investigators. They were prey, and the town of Black Hollow would not let them leave easily. You made it back for now, but the things in the dark never truly leave, do they? They watch, they wait, and perhaps they remember you now too. If you want to hear more, if you dare to listen again, step back into the shadows. Like the video, subscribe, but know this: some doors once opened do not close so easily.